I didn't flinch when Edmondo Palermo pointed at me. That was either courage or stupidity. I hadn't decided which yet. The room smelled like antiseptic and something sharper. Fear, maybe. The kind that clings to walls after too many whispered conversations and hurried exits. Machines hummed their steady rhythm, indifferent to the fact that the man in bed 412 had sent 3 nurses running in as many days. He sat upright despite the hospital gown, despite the IV line taped to his forearm, despite the dried blood still mapping a thin line from his temple to his jaw. His shoulders were squared like he was sitting behind a desk instead of propped against standard-issue pillows. Dark eyes, stillness that felt heavier than shouting. "Leave," he said. His voice was low, even, the kind of calm that made you forget calm could be dangerous. "Before you regret it." I adjusted my grip on the clipboard, met his gaze. "I'm Crystal McGovern. I'll be your nurse until 7. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, irritation, maybe both. His finger remained outstretched, aimed at my chest like a verdict he expected me to obey. "You're not listening." "I am," I said. "You're just not used to being heard." Of course, the most dangerous man on the floor had bone structure that could make a statue weep. Inside my head, I added, "This is exactly how my Tuesday should go," threatened by a man who probably has people for that. I'd heard the stories at the nurses' station, whispers over bad coffee about how he'd stared down the last nurse until she'd dropped his chart and fled, how another had lasted 6 hours before requesting a transfer. How the charge nurse's mouth went tight every time his name appeared on the board. Edmondo Palermo. The name alone made people look away. I didn't look away because I'd learned something the hard way. Fear feeds on reaction. I'd flinched before, years ago in a kitchen that smelled like burned dinners and broken promises. In a courtroom where my voice shook, but my decision didn't. I'd learned that some men mistake silence for submission. Others mistake it for strategy. I still wasn't sure which one he was. Quick question. Have you ever stood your ground with someone dangerous just to prove you weren't afraid? Comment yes or no and tell me why. I need to know I'm not alone in this. Also comment where you are watching from. I want to see how far Edmondo and Crystal's story travels. He lowered his hand slowly, watching me like a man studying a lock he hadn't expected to find. "Every nurse before you left." "I know. You think you're different?" "I think," I said, pulling the blood pressure cuff from the wall mount, "that you're injured, medicated, and due for vitals. So we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the way that gets me writing incident reports until midnight." His jaw tightened. Not anger, something closer to restraint. Like he was deciding whether I was brave or foolish, and the answer mattered more than it should. I crossed to the bed, aware of the heat radiating from his skin before I even touched him, aware of how his attention followed every movement without shifting his gaze, aware that the 2 men in dark suits standing outside his door had gone very, very still. When I wrapped the cuff around his bicep, his muscles tensed beneath my fingers. "Relax," I said. "I don't." "Then this will take longer." The corner of his mouth shifted, not quite a smile, something sharper. "You're not afraid." I pressed start on the monitor, watching the numbers climb. "I didn't say that." "Then why are you still here?" I met his eyes, held them. "Because fear doesn't get to make my decisions anymore." The machine beeped. I noted the reading, elevated but stable, and released the cuff. His skin was warm where my knuckles had brushed his forearm. I pretended not to notice. He pretended he hadn't noticed me noticing. I should not be cataloging the way danger looks in a hospital gown. This is not professional. This is not safe. "Your pressure's high," I said. "I've been shot." "Is that your excuse for everything?" This time the smile reached his eyes. Briefly, like light through a cracked door. "It's worked so far." I made a note on the chart, hyper-aware of the silence stretching between us. The kind of silence that isn't empty, it's waiting. Outside, I could hear the distant hum of the hospital, call bells, hurried footsteps, someone laughing at the nurse's station. In here, the world had narrowed to the space between his bed and my breath. "They brought you in 3 days ago," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Clinical. Gunshot wound, concussion, fractured rib. You've refused pain medication twice, discharged 2 nurses, and haven't slept more than an hour at a time. You've done your research." I read charts, it's part of the job. "And what does the chart say about why I'm still here?" I glanced up. His gaze hadn't wavered. "It says you're stable enough to leave but staying anyway." "Observant. Concerned," I corrected. He leaned back slightly, and I caught the wince he tried to hide. Pain sharpened the edges of even the most controlled men. I'd seen it before, the way they held themselves together until they thought no one was looking. "You don't need to stay," he said quietly. "Whatever they're paying you isn't worth it." "Worth what?" "Being close to me." I should have left it there. Should have finished the vitals, updated the chart, and walked out like every rational part of me was screaming to do. Instead, I heard myself say, "You don't get to decide what I'm worth." Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe. Or respect. He studied me the way a man studies something unexpected, carefully, like he wasn't sure whether to step closer or step back. "What happened to you?" he asked, so soft I almost missed it. "What makes you think something did?" Because women who've been safe their whole lives don't stand this close to danger without flinching. My breath caught, just for a second, just long enough for him to notice. Damn him for being perceptive. Damn me for letting it show. "I should finish my rounds," I said. "You should." I turned toward the door, made it 3 steps before his voice stopped me. "Crystal." I looked back. He was watching me with an intensity that felt like a hand against my spine, steady, unavoidable, warm. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" I could have lied, could have said something deflective, something that would have ended the conversation and let me leave with my walls intact. Instead, I told him the truth. "I am," I said. "I'm just not afraid of fear anymore." His eyes darkened. Not with anger, with something I couldn't name yet. Something that made the air between us feel thinner, sharper, like the moment before lightning. He leaned forward slightly, ignoring the pull of the IV line, ignoring the pain I knew was lancing through his ribs. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "You should be afraid of me, Crystal. Why aren't you?" I should have walked out. Instead, I stood there, clipboard pressed against my ribs like armor, and let his question hang in the air between us. "You should be afraid of me, Crystal. Why aren't you?" "Maybe I am," I said finally. "Maybe I'm just better at it than the others." His eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in assessment, like he was recalculating something he'd already decided about me. I left before he could respond. The night shift stretched long and quiet. I checked on Mr. Alvarez in 4:08, adjusted Mrs. Chen's IV in 4:15, fielded a call from a family member who thought midnight was an appropriate time to discuss discharge instructions. Normal, routine, the kind of work that kept my hands busy and my mind from wandering back to room 412. It didn't work. At 2 a.m., I brought him water without being asked. He was awake. Of course he was. Sitting upright in the dark, staring at nothing, or maybe everything. The faint glow from the monitors painted shadows across his face, softening nothing. "You don't sleep," I said quietly, setting the pitcher on the bedside table. "Neither do you." "I'm working." "So am I." I almost asked what kind of work a man does from a hospital bed. Almost. Instead, I poured the water, handed him the cup, and watched him drink. His hand was steady. Mine should have been. "Thank you," he said, and the words sounded foreign in his mouth, like he didn't use them often. "You're welcome." I turned to leave. His voice stopped me again. It was becoming a habit, him stopping me letting him. "The coffee you brought yesterday," he said. "How did you know?" "Because I pay attention. Because noticing details keeps people alive in this job. Because I saw the way you watched the other nurse pour it wrong and said nothing." "Lucky guess," I said instead. "You don't strike me as someone who guesses. And you don't strike me as someone who drinks hospital coffee willingly. Yet here we are." The corner of his mouth lifted. Barely, but I caught it. Of course, the most dangerous man I've ever met has a smile that could stop traffic. This is absolutely fair. By the third night, I realized he was studying me, not obviously, not the way men usually do, with appraisal or assumption. This was different, quieter. He watched the way I moved through the room, efficient but unhurried, noticed when I anticipated his needs before he voiced them, tracked the moments I let silence settle instead of filling it with nervous chatter. He was learning me the way some people learn maps. It should have unsettled me. It did unsettle me. But something else threaded through the unease, curiosity, maybe recognition. He looked at me like he was seeing something familiar in unfamiliar territory. "You've worked here long?" he asked during a vitals check. 3 years. Before that? Different hospital, different city. Running from something? My hand paused on the blood pressure cuff. Recovering from something. He didn't press. That was the thing about Edmondo. He didn't pry, didn't push, didn't demand answers the way powerful men usually do. He just waited. And somehow, the waiting was more compelling than any question. "Your pressure's better," I said, noting the numbers. "Good behavior. Is that what we're calling it? Would you prefer I misbehave?" The words landed somewhere between invitation and warning. I kept my expression neutral, professional, even as my pulse kicked up. Do not flirt with the mafia boss. Do not flirt with the man who makes security guards nervous. Do not— "I'd prefer you follow doctor's orders and actually rest," I said. "Careful, Crystal. You're starting to sound concerned." "It's my job to be concerned." "Is that all it is?" I met his gaze, held it longer than I should have. "What else would it be?" His smile was slow, dangerous, and entirely too knowing. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." The test came on the 4th night. I walked in to find him standing by the window, IV pole beside him, looking out at the city lights like a man surveying his kingdom from exile. He shouldn't have been out of bed. The monitors weren't even connected. "Mr. Palermo, Edmondo," he corrected, not turning around. "You need to be in bed." "I need a lot of things. That's not one of them." I crossed the room, reached for his arm to guide him back. He didn't move, didn't even acknowledge my touch except for the slight tension in his shoulders. "This isn't a negotiation," I said. "Everything is a negotiation." "Not with me." He turned then, and the space between us contracted to something almost unbearable. Close enough to feel the heat of him, close enough to see the faint scar above his eyebrow, the exhaustion he hid behind control, the pain he refused to name. "You're not afraid of me," he said softly, "but you should be afraid of this." "This? Whatever you think is happening here." My throat went dry. "Nothing is happening here. You're my patient. I'm your nurse. That's the beginning and end of it." "Liar." The word was gentle, almost affectionate. It landed like a hand against my cheek, startling, intimate, impossible to ignore. "I don't lie," I said. "Everyone lies, Crystal. The question is what they're lying about." He paused, his gaze dropping briefly to my mouth before returning to my eyes. "Are you lying to me? Or to yourself? Damn him. Damn him for being right." "Get back in bed," I said, hating how unsteady my voice sounded. He smiled, a real one this time, small and devastating. Then he obeyed. As I reconnected the monitors, my hands shook. Just slightly, just enough for him to notice. "You lasted longer than the others," he said quietly. "I'm not done yet. That's what worries me." I didn't see the man in the hallway until my shift ended. Dark suit, cold eyes, the kind of stillness that comes from violence, not patience. He was leaning against the wall near the nurse's station, watching room 412 like a predator watches a den. When I passed, he didn't move, didn't speak, just looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Calculation, curiosity, something darker underneath. I kept walking, didn't look back, didn't let my pace change, but my hands were shaking when I reached the locker room. He always breaks them. I remembered the whisper from days ago. Not through cruelty, through proximity, through whatever gravity pulled people into his orbit and never let them leave intact. I grabbed my bag, my jacket, my keys, told myself I'd request a transfer in the morning. Told myself this was the smart choice, the safe choice, the only choice that made sense. I made it halfway to my car before I stopped, turned around, went back inside. Edmondo was still awake when I slipped back into his room near dawn. "Forget something?" he asked without looking up. "No." "Then why are you here?" I didn't have a good answer. Didn't have a safe one. So I told the truth. Again. "I don't know yet." He finally looked at me. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, recognition, maybe relief. "You should go home, Crystal." "I will." "When?" "When my shift actually ends." He studied me for a long moment. Then, so quietly I almost missed it. "They're watching you now, the men outside. They think you matter." My stomach dropped. "Do I?" His jaw tightened. When he spoke, his voice carried a warning wrapped in something that sounded almost like regret. "You shouldn't." The words followed me through the rest of my shift like a shadow I couldn't shake. I checked vitals, updated charts, fielded questions from the day staff during handoff, normal tasks, routine motions. But my mind kept circling back to the way Edmondo had said it, not as a threat, but as something closer to a plea. "They think you matter." I told myself it didn't change anything. I was his nurse, he was my patient. The men in dark suits outside his room were not my concern. The fact that one of them had watched me with cold calculation was not my problem. I almost believed it. The incident happened on my 6th night. I was restocking the supply cart outside room 410 when I heard it. A child crying. Not the usual fussy discomfort of a sick kid, but real fear. The kind that comes from being small and lost in a place that smells like sickness and strangers. I found her near the stairwell, maybe 4 years old, barefoot, hospital gown swallowing her tiny frame. Her face was streaked with tears, and she was clutching a stuffed rabbit like it was the only solid thing in the world. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, crouching down. "Are you lost?" She nodded, hiccuping. "I want my mama." "I know. Let's find her together, okay?" Before I could reach for her hand, I heard footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, the kind that make you aware of exactly how empty a hospital hallway can feel at 3 a.m. I turned. Edmondo stood there, IV pole beside him, hospital gown and all. He shouldn't have been out of bed, again. But what struck me wasn't the defiance. It was the way he looked at the child. Not with impatience or irritation, with something careful, almost gentle. "She wandered from pediatrics," he said quietly. "4th floor." "How do you—" I heard her from my room. The girl had stopped crying, distracted by this tall, dark-haired man who somehow didn't seem scary despite the bandage on his temple and the sharp edge of danger he carried like a second skin. Edmondo knelt, slowly, like the movement cost him, and met her eyes at her level. "What's your rabbit's name?" he asked, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Mr. Hops," she whispered. "Mr. Hops is very brave. He's taking good care of you." She nodded solemnly. "Your mama is worried," he continued. "But the nurse here," he glanced at me, "is going to bring you back to her. And Mr. Hops is going to make sure you're safe the whole way, yes?" "Yes," she said, her grip on the rabbit loosening slightly. Edmondo stood, wincing just barely, and looked at me. There was something in his expression I couldn't name, vulnerability maybe, or the echo of an old wound. 4th floor, room 428. Her mother's name is Sophia. How do you know that? I pay attention. Of course he does. Of course the man who terrifies grown adults just comforted a 4-year-old like it was the most natural thing in the world. I picked up the girl. She came willingly now, one small hand still clutching Mr. Hops, and started toward the elevator. When I glanced back, Edmondo was already walking toward his room, shoulders tight with pain he refused to show. "That man is nice," the girl said against my shoulder. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'm starting to think he might be." When I returned to his room an hour later, he was sitting in the chair by the window, staring out at the city again. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. The IV drip continued its slow, methodical work. He didn't look at me when I entered. "You should be resting," I said. "Should I?" "Doctor's orders." I've never been good at following orders. I moved to check the IV line, hyper-aware of how close I was standing, how still he'd gone. "You were good at following them tonight. With her. She's a child." "And?" He finally looked at me. "Children don't deserve fear. Neither do women." The certainty in his voice, the absolute conviction, caught me off guard. This wasn't a line. It wasn't performance. It was a code. A rule carved so deep into him that breaking it would be unthinkable. "Is that your line?" I asked. "The one you don't cross?" "Everyone has lines, Crystal. Even men like me." "Men like you," I repeated. "What does that mean?" He smiled, but there was no humor in it. "You know what it means. You've known since the moment you walked into this room. Dangerous, powerful, untouchable, the kind of man who makes people disappear without ever raising his voice." "I know what people say," I admitted. "Do you believe them?" I should have said yes. Should have let that answer sit between us like a wall. Instead, I found myself saying, "I don't know what to believe anymore." His gaze softened. Just barely. Just enough. "That's the smartest thing you've said yet." We talked that night. Really talked. Not about the shooting, or the men outside, or the reason he'd been targeted. We talked about Sicily, the island he'd left behind but never forgotten. About my father teaching me to drive in an empty parking lot, his patience infinite even when I stalled the engine 6 times. About how control can feel like safety until it becomes a cage. "You've been controlled before," he said, not a question. "Haven't we all?" "Not like you. I can see it in the way you move, like you're always checking exits." My chest tightened. Too perceptive. Too close. "Old habit," I said. "From?" I could have deflected. Could have changed the subject. But something about the darkness, the quiet, the way he listened without trying to fix, it loosened something I'd kept locked down for years. "A man who thought love meant ownership," I said quietly. "Who thought my silence meant agreement? Who—" I stopped, swallowed. "It doesn't matter anymore. It does if it brought you here." "Here?" "To a job where you protect people who can't protect themselves. To a room with a man everyone else runs from." He paused. "To me." The air between us shifted, thickened. I could feel the pull of him like gravity, dangerous, inevitable, impossible to ignore. "I should go," I said, not moving. "You should," he agreed, not looking away. Neither of us moved. "Edmondo." "Don't," he said softly. "Whatever you're about to say, don't. Not yet." "Why?" "Because once you say it, we can't pretend anymore." "Pretend what? That this is professional? That I'm not drawn to him in ways I don't understand? That staying near him isn't the most reckless thing I've done in years?" I left before I could finish that thought out loud. The warning came the next evening. I was in the break room pouring coffee that tasted like regret and exhaustion when one of the security guards, Marcus, decent guy, 2 kids, pulled me aside. "Crystal," he said, voice low, I need you to be careful. Careful about what? Him, Palermo. Marcus glanced toward the hallway. The men he has watching this floor, they're not just bodyguards, they're assessing, and I've seen the way they look at you. I'm just doing my job. I know, but they don't see it that way. He hesitated. People who get close to him don't stay neutral. They become something else. Assets, liabilities, targets. My stomach dropped. What are you saying? I'm saying you've lasted longer than anyone, and that makes you visible. His expression was grim. Once you're visible to them, you don't get to be invisible again. I went back to Edmondo's room that night, even though I shouldn't have. He was awake. Always awake. They're watching me, I said without preamble. I know. You knew and you didn't? Warn you? He turned to face me fully. Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was trying to manipulate you? I didn't answer. Couldn't. This is what proximity to me costs, Crystal, he said quietly. Safety, anonymity, the ability to walk away without consequence. His jaw tightened. If you stay, people will use you. Against you? Against both of us. I should have walked away then. Should have requested a transfer, changed my schedule, done anything except what I actually did. I stayed. The hospital quieted after midnight. Always did. The chaos of dinner trays and visiting hours gave way to something slower, machines humming, soft footsteps, the occasional call bell breaking the stillness. This was the hour when people either healed or didn't, when the body decided whether to fight or surrender. I'd always preferred night shifts. Fewer witnesses to the small failures, more space to think. Lately I'd been thinking too much. I brought Edmondo his coffee at 1 a.m. No cream, 1 sugar, exactly the temperature he preferred even though he'd never told me. He'd stopped pretending not to notice how I knew. You're late, he said without looking up from the book in his lap. Something in Italian. I couldn't read the title. Busy night. Liar. I set the cup on the table beside him. You're very convinced I lie to you. Not to me, he said, finally meeting my eyes. To yourself. Of course he sees that. Of course the man reads people the way I read vital signs. Drink your coffee before it gets cold, I said. He smiled, a real one, small and devastating. See? Deflection. You're good at it. Years of practice. With who? I should have deflected again. Should have changed the subject, checked his vitals, invented an excuse to leave. Instead, I found myself sinking into the chair across from him, exhaustion winning over self-preservation. With myself mostly, I admitted. It's easier to stay busy than to sit with things. What things? The ones that hurt if you look at them too long. He nodded slowly. Like I'd just confirmed something he'd already suspected. You're running from something. I thought we established I was recovering from something. Same thing, different speed. I almost laughed. Would have, if the observation hadn't landed quite so close to bone. And what are you doing here, Edmondo? In a hospital bed when you could have left days ago? His expression shifted, something guarded sliding behind his eyes. Recovering. From a bullet wound or from whatever put you in its path? He took a sip of coffee, slow and deliberate, buying himself time. When he spoke, his voice was quieter. You're perceptive. You're evasive. Touché. We sat in companionable silence, the kind that doesn't require filling. Outside the window, the city glowed, 1,000 small lights holding back the dark. Inside this room, the world had narrowed to 2 people who should not be comfortable with each other but somehow were. This shooting, I said carefully. It wasn't random. No. Was it a warning? It was a message. What kind of message? He looked at me then, really looked, like he was deciding how much truth I could handle. The kind that says you've stayed neutral too long and someone wants to change that. Are they going to try again? Probably. The calm in his voice should have terrified me. It didn't. Maybe because I'd seen the way he moved through fear, not around it, but through it, with the kind of control that comes from practice. "You're not afraid," I said. "I'm always afraid. I'm just better at it than most people." Just like me, I thought. Just like us. The routine became hours without discussion. I'd bring coffee. He'd pretend to read. We'd talk about things that mattered and things that didn't. His grandmother's recipe for pasta alla norma, the time I'd accidentally locked myself out of my apartment in winter, the strange comfort of hospital silence at 3 a.m. He never asked about my past directly. I never asked about his present. We existed in the spaces between, safe because we both understood the cost of pushing too hard. One night he asked, "Why nursing?" "My father," I said. "He had a stroke when I was 17. The nurses who cared for him, they saw him. Not just the patient, but the person. I wanted to do that for someone else." "Did he recover?" "No. But he had 6 good months because of them. 6 months where he still knew my name, still laughed at bad jokes, still felt cared for." I paused. That mattered. Edmondo's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He taught me something important before he died." "What?" "That kindness isn't weakness, that paying attention is its own form of protection." I met his eyes. "That the people who seem the most controlled are usually the most afraid." Something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe pain. "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was. He would have liked you." "Why?" "Because you don't waste words. He hated small talk." Edmondo smiled. "I think I would have liked him too." The moment stretched, warm and fragile. I could feel the pull of him, not just physical, though that was there, simmering beneath every conversation. This was something deeper, the recognition of shared damage, the understanding that some scars don't heal, they just become part of the landscape. "Crystal," he said softly, "I need you to understand something." "What?" He hesitated, choosing his words with care. "The men outside, the ones watching, they're not here to protect me. They're here to assess risk. And you—" He stopped, frustration crossing his features. "You've become a risk." "To you?" "To yourself." My stomach tightened. "I can take care of myself." "I know. That's not the problem." He leaned forward slightly, close enough that I could see the exhaustion he hid behind control. "The problem is that you shouldn't have to because of me." "I'm not." The lights flickered. Just once, just enough. Edmondo's entire body went still, the kind of stillness that comes from instinct, not thought. His hand moved to the edge of the bed, fingers curling like he was reaching for something that wasn't there. "What is it?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "The generators should have kicked in immediately." "They did. That's just the hospital's electrical system. It's old." "No." His eyes were on the door now, sharp and focused. "It's not." I listened, really listened. The usual hum of the hospital had shifted, quieter somehow, like the building was holding its breath. "Stay here," I said, standing. His hand shot out, catching my wrist. Not hard, not demanding, but firm enough to stop me. "Don't. Edmondo, I need to check. Not alone. Not right now. You're being paranoid." "I'm being careful. There's a difference." I should have argued, should have pulled away, reminded him that I didn't take orders, that this was my hospital and my job. But something in his expression stopped me. Not fear exactly, but something close. Knowledge. The kind that comes from experience I didn't have. The lights flickered again. This time they stayed dim for 3 full seconds before returning. Edmondo released my wrist and stood, too fast, ignoring the pain that flashed across his face. He moved to the door, listening to something I couldn't hear. "What's wrong?" I whispered. "The alarms," he said quietly. "They should be screaming right now." He was right. Emergency protocols meant backup generators, automatic alerts, fail-safes upon fail-safes. The silence was wrong, deliberate. My heart kicked against my ribs. Edmondo turned to me, his expression carved from something harder than marble. When he spoke, his voice was absolutely calm, absolutely certain. "Lock the door, now." Before I could move, we both heard it. Footsteps in the hallway. Too many, too synchronized, moving with purpose toward a destination they'd already chosen. Moving toward us. I crossed the room in 3 strides and locked the door. The deadbolt slid home with a sound too quiet to be reassuring. Edmondo was already moving, disconnecting his IV line with practiced efficiency, yanking the tape free without flinching. Blood welled at the insertion site. He ignored it. "What are you doing?" I whispered. "Being ready." He pulled open the bedside drawer, searching for something that clearly wasn't there. His jaw tightened. "They cleared the room." "Who?" "People who don't want me mobile." The footsteps stopped outside the door. My heart slammed against my ribs. I counted 3 distinct sets, maybe 4. Too many for security, too purposeful for medical staff. The silence that followed was worse than sound. Edmondo moved to the window, testing the lock. It didn't budge. "Sealed," he muttered. "They thought of everything." "Who's they?" He didn't answer. His attention was on the door, calculating angles and options with the kind of focus that comes from practice, from survival. "Crystal," he said quietly, "when I tell you you're going to walk out that door and go straight to the stairwell, don't stop, don't look back." "I'm not leaving you." "Yes, you are." "No," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I'm not." He turned to face me fully. For the first time since I'd met him, I saw fear crack through the control, raw and immediate and entirely focused on me. "If they come through that door and you're here," his voice caught. "Crystal, please. Please." The word sounded foreign in his mouth, desperate. "I'm staying," I said. The door handle rattled. Once, twice, then stopped. A voice came through, low, calm. Too polite to be genuine. "Mr. Palermo, we just want to talk." Edmondo's expression went cold. "Then talk. Open the door." "No." Silence. Then, "We're not here for her. Send the nurse out." I felt Edmondo's gaze lock onto mine, a silent question, a desperate command. "Go, please go." I shook my head. His jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle jump. "She stays." "That's unfortunate." The first impact hit the door like a fist. The frame shuddered but held. Old hospital. Solid construction. Built before they cared about easy access. I grabbed the crash cart from the hallway and shoved it against the door. Edmondo joined me without a word, adding the weight of the bedside table, his hands moving with brutal efficiency, despite the pain I knew was tearing through his ribs. "You should have run," he said through gritted teeth. "You should have stayed in bed weeks ago. We're both terrible at following orders." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. The second impact was harder. The door cracked but didn't break. "They're not trying very hard," I said. "They don't need to. They're waiting for someone to notice. Cameras, security, an excuse to escalate." "So what do? "We survive the next 5 minutes." Of course. Of course the plan is just survive. Why did I expect anything more strategic from a man in a hospital gown? The lights went out completely. Emergency backup should have kicked in. It didn't. The machines flatlined into silence. No hum, no beeps, just the absence of everything that had been holding the hospital together. Darkness swallowed us whole. I heard Edmondo move before I saw him. Felt his hand find mine in the blackness. Warm, steady, deliberate. "Stay close," he whispered against my ear. His breath on my skin sent a shock through me that had nothing to do with fear. Not now. Not here. Do not think about how close he is. Do not... "Crystal." His voice was rough. "If something happens, nothing's happening. If it does... Edmondo, stop." He pulled me closer. Not gently. but with the kind of urgency that comes from panic barely restrained. I could feel his heart racing against my shoulder, could feel the tremor in his hands that he was fighting to control. I can't. He stopped, started again. If they hurt you because of me, I will burn my world down. Do you understand? The rawness in his voice, the crack in the armor, nearly undid me. I understand, I whispered. But they won't. How can you possibly know that? Because you're going to stay alive, and I'm very good at my job. He made a sound, half laugh, half exhale. You're insane. Probably. The pounding on the door stopped. We stood frozen in the dark, listening, waiting. My hand was still in his, our fingers laced together with a desperation neither of us acknowledged. Then I heard it, faint, distant, but unmistakable. Sirens, security alarms. The hospital waking up to the breach. Edmondo heard it too. His grip on my hand loosened slightly. They're pulling back. Are you sure? They have to. Too many witnesses now. The lights flickered back on, dim at first, then steady. I blinked against the sudden brightness, disoriented by the shift from darkness to exposure. Edmondo was closer than I'd realized, close enough to see the cut on his arm where he'd torn the IV out, close enough to see the fear still lingering in his eyes, sharpening into something else, something dangerous. Are you hurt? He asked. No, are you? No. We were lying. Both of us. Just in different ways. The door crashed open. Security flooded in. Uniforms, radios, controlled chaos. Someone was asking questions. Someone else was checking the room. I answered automatically, using words like breach and unauthorized access and patient safety, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. On the way Edmondo had whispered my name in the dark. On the way his hand had trembled when he'd pulled me close. On the way terror and desire had braided together into something I couldn't untangle. They moved him to a different room, more secure, more isolated. I wasn't assigned to his care anymore, hospital policy after a security incident. Someone else would handle his vitals, his medications, his discharge. I should have been relieved. I lasted 6 hours before I went looking for him. I found him in the ICU wing, behind locked doors and badge access I shouldn't have had. The charge nurse, Sharon, good woman, knew when not to ask questions, had left the door propped open. An accident, she'd said. I didn't believe her. Edmondo was standing by the window when I walked in. No IV, no monitors, just a man waiting for something, or someone. He turned when he heard me. You shouldn't be here, he said. I know. They'll fire you if they find out. Probably. He studied me for a long moment. Why did you come back? I didn't have a good answer. Didn't have a safe one. So I told him the truth. Because I needed to know you were okay. His expression shifted, something raw and unguarded breaking through. I am. Because of you. I didn't do anything. You stayed. He crossed the distance between us, slow and deliberate. When you should have run, you stayed. We were too close now. Close enough to feel the heat of him. Close enough to make choices I couldn't take back. Edmondo, they're coming for me, he said quietly. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow, but soon. And when they do, anyone close to me becomes a target. I know. Then walk away, Crystal. Please. I can't. Why? Because I saw you comfort a child. Because you listen without fixing. Because you crack jokes in the dark and shake when you think I might get hurt. Because I feel safer with you than I have in years, and that terrifies me more than any threat. I don't know, I lied. He reached up slowly, giving me time to pull away, and brushed his thumb across my cheek. The touch was reverent, restrained, devastating. You're not safe with me, he whispered. I'm not safe without you either. His breath hitched. For one suspended moment I thought he might kiss me, thought I might let him. Instead, he stepped back, drew in air like a man surfacing from deep water. "Go home, Crystal. Lock your doors, and if anyone asks about me, lie." I left because staying would have broken something neither of us could repair. The message came 3 days later. A text from an unknown number. No words, just a photo. Me. Outside the hospital, leaving my shift. The angle suggested someone had been watching for a while. My hand shook as I deleted it. Then it came again. Same photo, different number. I called Edmondo's room. A woman answered, professional, detached. "Mr. Palermo checked out this morning. Would you like to leave a message?" I hung up. The third photo arrived at midnight. Same image, new detail, a red circle drawn around my car in the parking lot, and underneath, a single line of text. "He should have sent you away when he had the chance." I stared at the message until the screen went dark. Then I locked every door, checked every window, and didn't sleep. The next evening I found Edmondo exactly where I knew he'd be, not at the hospital. They'd discharged him 3 days ago, but I'd seen the way his security moved, the patterns they kept. I'd noticed the black sedan that appeared outside my apartment twice in 2 days, always at a distance, never threatening, just watching, protecting or assessing, maybe both. The address came from Marcus, the security guard, delivered with a warning I ignored. "He doesn't want you involved, Crystal. Respect that." I couldn't. The building was unremarkable. Old brick, industrial, the kind of place that held secrets without advertising them. The elevator required a code I shouldn't have had. The hallway was empty, quiet. The door opened before I could knock. Edmondo stood there, still healing, wearing exhaustion like a second skin. His eyes widened briefly, surprise, then something darker, resignation. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "You keep saying that. You keep not listening. I'm consistent that way." He stepped aside. "Let me in." The apartment was sparse, expensive but impersonal, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that looked untouched, no photographs, no warmth, the space of a man who lived in it but didn't belong to it. "How did you find me?" he asked, closing the door. "I'm observant. You taught me that." "I taught you to stay safe." "You taught me to pay attention." I turned to face him. "The photos, the messages, that was a warning." "Yes. For you or for me?" "Both." I should have been terrified. Should have turned around and walked out. Instead, I felt something settle in my chest, certainty, maybe, or the kind of calm that comes from finally stopping the run. "I got 3 more," I said quietly. "All from different numbers, all showing me leaving work, going home, existing." I paused. "They want me afraid." "Are you?" "Yes, but not enough to leave." His jaw tightened. "Crystal, I need to tell you something," I said before I could stop myself, "and I need you to just listen. No fixing, no protecting, just listen." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded, moved to the couch and sat, leaving space beside him, an invitation without pressure. I stayed standing. If I sat, I'd lose my nerve. 7 years ago, I began, voice steadier than I expected, I gave up a child, a daughter. Edmondo went very still. I was 18, broke. Married to a man who thought control and love were the same thing. I wrapped my arms around myself. When I got pregnant, I thought it would change him, make him gentler. It didn't. It made him worse. "Don't cry. Don't you dare cry. Just say it. He didn't hit me, not often, but he owned me in other ways, isolated me, made me believe I was nothing without him, that no one else would want me." I swallowed hard. When she was born, I looked at her and realized I couldn't protect her. Not there, not with him. So I made a choice. I finally looked at Edmondo. His expression was unreadable, but his attention was absolute. I gave her to a couple who could give her safety, stability, a life I couldn't. My voice cracked. I signed the papers, left my marriage, started over. And I've carried the weight of that choice every single day since. The silence stretched. I waited for judgment, for pity, for the inevitable questions about whether I'd tried hard enough or fought long enough. Instead, Edmondo said quietly, "What's her name?" The question broke me, just a little. "Lily," I whispered. "I named her Lily before I let her go." He nodded slowly. "You chose survival, for both of you. I chose to run." "No." His voice was firm, certain. "You chose to protect her from something you couldn't fight alone. That's not cowardice, Crystal. That's love." The tears came then, silent, unwelcome, unstoppable. I turned away, embarrassed by the rawness, by how much his words had cut through defenses I'd spent years building. I heard him stand, felt him cross the room. He stopped just behind me, close enough for warmth, far enough to let me choose. "I would never use that against you," he said softly. "I know." I turned to face him. "That's why I told you." His hand lifted slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, he brushed the tears from my cheek with a gentleness that felt like worship. "Thank you," he said, "for trusting me. Thank you for not making me regret it." We stood there, too close and not close enough, the space between us charged with everything we weren't saying. I could feel the pull of him, the desire to close the distance, to let comfort become something more. But Edmondo stepped back first. Always first. "You're not safe here," he said. "I know." "Then why did you come?" "Because I needed you to know me. Because secrets are only as powerful as the silence around them. Because you make me feel seen in ways I've been hiding from for years." "Because I was tired of running," I said instead. His expression softened. "I understand that." "Do you?" "More than you know." We talked through the night, about Sicily and second chances, about the weight of choices made in desperation, about how some scars never heal but learn to bend instead of break. He told me about his grandmother, who'd raised him after his parents died. About the promise he'd made to her. Never hurt the innocent, never become the thing you fear. "She made me memorize it," he said with something close to a smile. "Every morning before school. Proteggere I deboli, non diventare il mostro. Protect the weak, don't become the monster." "Is that why you have rules?" I asked. "Women." "Children." "Yes." "And if you break them?" "Then I've lost the only thing that makes this life bearable." I understood then, the control, the restraint, the quiet violence he held at bay. It wasn't power. It was survival. "Edmondo," I said softly, "what happens now?" "Now you go home, lock your doors, stay visible." "And you?" "I handle this." "Alone?" "Always alone. Of course, the man who makes me feel less alone is the one who never lets anyone close enough to stay." "That sounds exhausting," I said. "It is." "Then let me help." "No." "Why?" He moved closer, close enough for me to see the exhaustion in his eyes, the fear he kept locked beneath control. "Because if something happens to you, I won't forgive myself, and I need to be able to live with the things I've done." The honesty gutted me. "Nothing's going to happen to me," I said. "You can't promise that." "Neither can you." He smiled, sad, rueful, achingly beautiful. "No, I can't." I left just before dawn, with his promise to call if anything changed and my promise not to do anything reckless. We were both lying. The envelope was waiting on my doorstep when I got home, plain, unmarked, heavy. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single photograph. Lily. Older now, maybe 6. Smiling at a playground, pigtails catching sunlight, surrounded by safety I'd given her by leaving. And underneath, written in careful script, "She's beautiful. It would be a shame if she lost her mother twice. I stopped breathing. Then I called Edmondo. He answered on the first ring. Crystal? Did you do this? My voice was steady, cold, a control I didn't feel. Silence. Did you send someone to find her, to photograph her, to threaten me with the one thing I trusted you with? No. His voice was quiet. Absolute. I would never... Then how? I was shaking now, rage and fear braiding together into something sharp. How do they know about her? I've never told anyone here, not my co-workers, not my landlord, not anyone except you. Another pause. Longer this time. Crystal, listen to me. I am listening. I'm listening to silence where an explanation should be. I didn't do this, he said again, each word careful, measured. But someone close to me might have. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means people watch me. Track who I talk to, who I spend time with. And if they think someone matters... He stopped. They gather leverage. Leverage. The word tasted like ash. You mean they researched me because I stayed near you? Yes. And you knew this could happen? Yes. And you let me get close anyway. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Yes, he said finally. Quietly. I did. I closed my eyes, felt the weight of every choice that had led me here, to this moment, this apartment, this photograph of the child I'd given up to keep safe. She was supposed to be protected, I whispered. That was the point. That was the only point. She still is, Edmondo said. They're showing you they know. They're not showing you they've touched her. There's a difference. That's supposed to comfort me? No. It's supposed to give you information. Of course he's calm. Of course he's already 3 steps ahead while I'm drowning. I can't do this, I said. Crystal. No, I can't. My voice cracked. I gave her up to keep her safe. I've spent 7 years living with that choice. And now because I stayed near you, because I trusted you, she's at risk again. She's not at risk. You are. Then I'm leaving. Where will you go? Away from you. Away from this. Somewhere they can't use her against me. They'll follow you, he said quietly. Distance won't change what they already know. Then what do you suggest, Edmondo? That I stay close to the man who made me visible? Who turned my biggest secret into ammunition? You didn't have to. My throat burned. You just had to let me matter. The silence that followed was absolute. When he spoke again, his voice was rougher, strained. You're right. I hadn't expected agreement. It disarmed me worse than an argument would have. I should have sent you away, he continued. The first night, the moment I realized you weren't afraid, I should have protected you by pushing you out. He exhaled slowly. I didn't, and that's on me. Why didn't you? Because I'm selfish, because I wanted... He stopped himself. It doesn't matter what I wanted. It does. God help me, it does. I'm taking a leave of absence, I said, from the hospital, from this city. I need distance. I understand. Do you? Yes. A pause. For what it's worth, Crystal, I believe you made the right choice. 7 years ago, and now. It doesn't feel right. It rarely does. I wanted to ask if he'd protect her, if he'd make sure no one touched her, used her, turned her into collateral, but asking meant staying tethered, and I couldn't afford that anymore. Goodbye, Edmondo. Be safe, Crystal. I hung up before he could hear me cry. Packing took 2 hours. Clothes, essentials, things I could carry in one trip. I left the furniture, the mail, the life I'd built here. None of it mattered. Not anymore. Running, again. 7 years later, and I'm still running. At least I'm consistent. The bitter humor didn't help. I was loading the last bag into my car when I felt it. The weight of being watched. Not the casual glance of a neighbor. Something heavier. More deliberate. I scanned the parking lot. Empty. The streetlights cast long shadows but revealed nothing. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Hello? Ms. McGovern." A woman's voice. Smooth. Polite. Wrong. "My name is Angela. I'm a friend of Edmondo's." "I don't know any Angela." "No, but I know you." A pause. "I'm the one who sent the photograph." My blood went cold. "I wanted to reach out personally," she continued, tone pleasant, like we were discussing dinner plans. "To clarify a few things. I don't want to talk to you." "That's understandable, but you should listen anyway." Background noise. Traffic. Maybe voices. She was outside. Close. "Leaving was smart. It shows good instincts, but it won't solve your problem." "What problem?" "Edmondo cares about you. That makes you valuable. To him and therefore to us." "I'm not valuable to him." "You called him first." "Not the police. Not a lawyer. Him." Her voice softened with something that sounded almost like sympathy. "That tells me everything I need to know." My hands tightened on the phone. "What do you want?" "Nothing yet. I'm just making sure you understand the situation." "Which is?" "That distance doesn't erase significance. And significance, Ms. McGovern, is dangerous in our world." She hung up. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to dead air and the sound of my own pulse. Then I got in my car and drove. I made it 200 miles before I stopped. Small motel. Cash only. The kind of place that didn't ask questions or keep records. I checked in under a name I hadn't used in years, locked the door, shoved a chair under the handle. My phone stayed off. The photograph stayed in my bag, face down, where I couldn't see Lily's smile. I should have felt safer. Distance, anonymity, no ties to Edmondo or his world. Instead, I felt exposed. They're showing you they know. They're not showing you they've touched her. I grabbed my laptop, fingers shaking as I typed her name, the one her adoptive parents had given her. Sarah Mitchell, 6 years old, lives in Connecticut. The search results loaded slowly, then froze. My screen went black. A single line of text appeared in white. "Looking for her won't keep her safe. Coming back might." Then the screen died completely. I yanked the battery out, threw the laptop across the room, and pressed my back against the wall. My breath came in short gasps. My vision blurred. Think. They hacked my laptop. They know where I am. They know what I'm searching for. They know. My phone, still off. Still in my bag. Began to ring. Impossible. The battery was out. But I could hear it. Vibrating. Insistent. I pulled it out with shaking hands. The screen was dark. Dead. But the sound continued. A piece of paper slipped out from under the door. I stared at it. Didn't move. Couldn't. Finally, I picked it up. Handwritten. Elegant script. "You should have stayed close to him." I was still staring at the note when the door opened. Not forced, not broken, just unlocked. Smoothly, deliberately, like whoever had the key had been given it. Edmondo stood in the doorway. No suit, no bodyguards. Just him, looking tired and furious, and somehow still in complete control. "How did you—" "I had someone follow you," he said quietly. "The moment you hung up. You had no right—" "I know." He stepped inside, closed the door, locked it behind him. His gaze swept the room, cataloging the barricaded chair, my laptop shattered on the floor, the note still clutched in my shaking hand. His jaw tightened. "Show me." I handed him the paper. He read it once, twice, then very carefully folded it and slid it into his pocket, like he was preserving evidence. "Angela," he said. Not a question. She called. Then this. I gestured at the laptop. "They hacked it. Knew what I was searching for. Knew where I was." "I know." "How?" "Because I've been tracking her for the last 6 hours." He moved to the window, checked the sightlines, pulled the curtain closed. She was never supposed to contact you directly. Who is she? Someone who thought using you would force me into a position I've been avoiding. His voice was cold, controlled, the kind of calm that precedes violence. She was wrong. I sank onto the edge of the bed, exhaustion and adrenaline finally catching up. This is because of me, because I stayed, because I mattered. Edmondo turned to face me. No, this is because she mistook restraint for weakness. What does that mean? It means I've been playing a long game, staying neutral. Refusing to choose sides in a war I didn't start. He paused. She thought she could force my hand by threatening you. And did she? His smile was sharp, dangerous. Yes. He made a single phone call. I couldn't hear what he said, his voice too low, his Italian too fast, but I watched his expression shift from controlled calm to something colder. Final. When he hung up, he looked at me. It's handled. What's handled? Angela. Her leverage. The people who thought your daughter was negotiable. My chest tightened. What did you do? What I should have done weeks ago. He sat in the chair across from me, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. I chose a side, burned bridges, called in debts I'd been saving. Made it very clear that touching you or anyone connected to you would cost more than they're willing to pay. Edmondo, your daughter is safe, he continued, voice steady. I had someone check. She's exactly where she should be, protected, happy, unaware any of this happened, and she'll stay that way. Tears burned behind my eyes. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Why? He looked at me with an expression I couldn't name, something raw and unguarded and achingly honest. Because you were right. I made you visible. I let you matter, and that meant I had a responsibility to protect what I'd put at risk. That's not... It is. He leaned back, exhaustion showing for the first time. I told myself I could keep you separate, safe. That proximity didn't mean involvement. A bitter laugh. I was lying to both of us. Of course he was. Of course the man who sees everything missed the most obvious truth. What did it cost you? I asked quietly. Neutrality, alliances, the ability to walk away from certain conflicts. He met my gaze. It doesn't matter. It does to me. It shouldn't. Too late. We sat in silence. The kind that doesn't need filling because everything important has already been said. Finally, I asked, what happens now? Now you decide. Decide what? Whether you trust me. He stood slowly, moving toward the door. I won't ask you to. I won't make promises I can't guarantee. But I will tell you this. If you walk away again, I won't follow. I won't track you. I won't send men to watch you from a distance. Why not? Because you deserve the choice I didn't give you before. My throat went tight. And if I stay? Then you stay knowing exactly what that means. Danger, visibility, the risk that someone someday might try to use you again. He paused, but also knowing I will do everything in my power to prevent it. That's not a promise. No, he agreed. It's a vow. The difference mattered. He left me the room key, a phone number I could reach him at, and a name, someone local, trustworthy, who'd keep watch until I decided what came next. Take your time, he said at the door. There's no rush. Where will you be? Cleaning up the mess I made. Edmondo. He turned back, hand on the doorframe. Thank you, I said, for protecting her, for not making me choose between her and... I stopped, couldn't finish. Between her and me. He finished quietly. You should never have to make that choice, Crystal. She comes first. Always. Then he left. I sat in that motel room for 3 hours, turning his words over like stones, looking for cracks, for manipulation, for the angle I'd missed. I found none. What I found instead was a man who'd sacrificed power for safety, who'd chosen action over explanation, who'd walked away to give me the space he'd never given me before. He didn't beg, didn't plead, didn't demand anything except that I decide for myself. That was the thing about Edmondo. He understood control because he'd lived in its shadow, and he understood freedom because he'd watched people lose it. He wasn't giving me freedom. He was protecting my right to choose it. I drove back the next morning, not to the city, not to my apartment, to the address he'd left me, a house on the outskirts, quiet and unremarkable, with security that looked like landscapers and cleaners but moved like soldiers. Edmondo was in the kitchen when I arrived, coffee brewing, morning light cutting through the windows. He looked up when I walked in, surprise flickering across his face before control slid back into place. "You came back," he said. I did. "Why?" I set my bag down, crossed the room, stopped just close enough to see the exhaustion in his eyes, the tension he was holding in his shoulders. "Because running didn't make me safer," I said, "and staying away didn't make me care less." His breath caught, just barely. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said quietly. "I know. I'm not asking you to stay." "I know that too." "Then what are you doing here, Crystal?" I met his gaze, held it, let him see everything I'd been too afraid to show before, the fear, the desire, the bone-deep exhaustion of running from something I wanted. "I'm choosing you," I said, "on my terms." Something shifted in his expression, relief, wonder, fear all at once. "What terms?" "Honesty, transparency. No more secrets kept from my protection." I paused. "And if you ever use distance as a shield again, I walk. No second chances." "Agreed." Just like that? Just like that. We stood there, the space between us charged with everything we'd survived to get here. I could feel the pull of him, the desire to close the distance, to let safety become something more. But this time, I waited. Let him choose. Edmondo moved first. Slowly, deliberately, giving me every opportunity to pull away. When I didn't, his hand found mine, warm, steady, certain. "I won't make you regret this," he said. "You'd better not." His smile was small, devastating, real. "Threatening me, Crystal?" "Always." He pulled me closer, not possessively but carefully, like he was holding something precious he'd almost lost. "If you walk away again," he whispered against my hair, "I won't stop you." My heart stuttered. "I know. But I'll wait. However long it takes, I'll wait." We stood there in the morning light, his arms around me, the weight of everything we'd survived pressed between us like a scar. I pulled back first, gently, not out of fear, but because I needed to see his face when I said what came next. "I have conditions," I said. "I expected you would." "I'm serious, Edmondo." "So am I." I moved to the kitchen table, needing distance to think clearly. He followed but didn't sit, just leaned against the counter, coffee in hand, waiting. Of course he waits. The man who threatened nurses into fleeing now stands in his own kitchen giving me space to set terms. "I stay on my terms," I began. "That means I keep working, keep my apartment, keep my life separate from yours when I need it." "Agreed. I meet Lily someday, when it's safe, when she's old enough to choose whether she wants to know me." His expression softened. "I'll make sure it's safe." "You can't promise that." "No," he admitted, "but I can make it safer than it would be otherwise." I nodded slowly. "I need you to tell me the truth, always, even when it's dangerous, even when you think hiding it protects me." "That one's harder," he said quietly, "because my instinct is to protect you by controlling information." "I know. But if I'm choosing this, choosing you, I need to know what I'm walking into." I paused. I can't make informed choices if you're deciding what I'm allowed to know. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. You're right. I'll tell you the truth, even when it scares me. And if you can't? Then I'll tell you I can't, and why. He set his coffee down. But I won't lie by omission. Not anymore? Okay. Okay? Those are my terms, I said. Take them or leave them. I'll take them. No hesitation, no negotiation. Anything else? Yes. I met his gaze. If this becomes something I can't survive, if the danger outweighs the safety, if staying costs me more than leaving, I walk. And you let me go without question. His jaw tightened. That's the hardest one. I know. Not because I don't want you to be safe, he said carefully, but because letting you walk into danger alone goes against everything He stopped, started again. But you're right. It has to be your choice. It does. Then I agree. I exhaled slowly. Then I'm staying. Something cracked in his expression, relief so profound it looked almost like pain. Crystal? On my terms, I reminded him. On your terms, he repeated. Always. We spent the day in that house, learning how to exist in the same space without urgency or fear. He made breakfast, eggs, toast, coffee exactly how I liked it. I corrected his technique. He let me. You're bossy in kitchens, he observed. You're controlling everywhere else. I'm claiming this territory. He smiled. Fair. We talked about logistics, my schedule, his security, how to navigate a relationship where danger was context, not crisis. He didn't minimize the risks. I didn't pretend I wasn't afraid. People will still watch you, he said, not to threaten you, but to assess. I know. And there will be moments when I have to make choices you won't like. As long as you tell me what they are and why, I can live with that. He nodded. What if I make the wrong choice? Then we deal with it. Together. Together, he repeated, like he was testing the weight of the word. That evening, he asked me something I hadn't expected. Do you regret it? Staying that first night? We were sitting on the couch, close but not touching, the city lights bleeding through the windows. Sometimes, I admitted, when I think about Lily, about the photo, about how much simpler life would be if I'd just walked away. But regret assumes the alternative would have been better, and I don't know that it would have been. I turned to face him. I think I would have spent the rest of my life wondering what I was too afraid to choose. His hand found mine. Slowly. Carefully. I don't want you to choose me out of fear. I'm not. I laced my fingers through his. I'm choosing you despite it. Is that better? It's honest. He smiled. Small, real, devastating. I'll take honest. Later, when the house was quiet and the world had narrowed to just us, he told me something I'd never asked. I wasn't supposed to survive the shooting, he said quietly. I went still. It was an execution, clean, professional. The only reason I'm alive is because the shooter hesitated. He paused. I don't know why. Maybe he knew me. Maybe he had a code like I do. It doesn't matter. But in that half second, I realized something. What? That I'd been waiting to die for a long time, not actively, not suicidal, just waiting for the inevitable. He looked at me. And then you walked in. And for the first time in years, I wanted to stay. My throat tightened. Edmondo, I'm not saying you saved me. You didn't. I saved myself by choosing something other than the war I was born into. He squeezed my hand. But you reminded me there was something worth choosing. I didn't know what to say to that. Didn't trust myself to speak without crying. So I kissed him instead. Slowly. Softly. A question and an answer all at once. He kissed me back with the kind of restraint I'd come to recognize, desire held in check by respect, passion tempered by care. His hand cupped my face like I was something precious, breakable, worth protecting. When we pulled apart, breathless and steady all at once, he rested his forehead against mine. "This doesn't fix me," he whispered. "I know. I'm still dangerous, still capable of things you don't want to know about." "I know that too." "Then why stay?" "Because danger isn't the same as damage, and because you've spent your whole life being controlled by violence. I won't control you with fear." His breath shuddered. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," I smiled, "but you chose me anyway, so we're even." 6 months later, I still worked at the hospital. Different floor, different shift, but the same work, caring for people who needed someone to see them, not just treat them. Edmondo still lived in his world, still made choices I didn't always understand, but he kept his promises: honesty, transparency, space when I needed it. We didn't live together. I kept my apartment, my independence, my exits. He never asked me to give them up. Some nights I stayed at his place, others he stayed at mine. We built something that looked less like romance and more like partnership. Two people choosing each other every day, knowing the cost, paying it anyway. The threats didn't disappear. They never would. But they became manageable, survivable. And Lily, my daughter Sarah now, stayed safe. Edmondo made sure of it, not by controlling her life, but by ensuring she remained invisible to his world. Someday, when she was older, I'd tell her the truth. Someday I'd give her the choice I'd taken away. But not yet. For now, she got to be a child. Safe. Loved. Unaware of the mother who'd walked away to give her that gift. And I got to be a woman who'd chosen love without losing herself. One morning, over coffee in his kitchen, Edmondo asked me the question I'd been waiting for. "Do you ever wish you'd walked away? That first night? Or any night after?" I thought about it. Really thought. About the fear, the danger, the photograph that had shattered my sense of safety. About the man who'd learned to wait instead of demand, who'd chosen peace over power, who'd given me the space to decide who I wanted to be. "No," I said finally, "I don't." "Why not?" "Because walking away would have been easier, and I'm tired of choosing easy over real." He smiled, reached for my hand across the table. "I love you," he said. Simple, certain, no dramatics. "I know," I said. "I love you too." We sat there in the morning light, two people who'd survived enough to know that love isn't rescue. It's choice. Every single day, it's choice. Would you have stayed or walked away? So, that's Crystal and Edmondo's story. Now I need your honest opinion. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? Drop your number in the comments and tell me what made you give it that score. Did the slow burn get you? The tension? Crystal's strength? Edmondo's restraint? I want to know what worked for you. And if you're here for more stories like this, dangerous men with morals, strong women who don't flinch, and love that's earned, not given, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for Bella's romance stories. Because trust me, we're just getting started. Like this video if Crystal and Edmondo had you hooked from the first chapter. And comment below, would you have stayed or walked away? See you in the next story.